Okay, welcome everyone to the February 2024 Microsoft 365 Modern Management Meetup. So the fact that it's Valentine's Day has not been lost on us. So, when we were planning this one out today, Aresh said, I love Windows 365 and Valentine's Day would be the appropriate day for me to profess my love for it. And Aresh is there saying I did not say any of those things at all. So welcome everyone. Just a quick introduction here from us before we get into the content. My name's Mark O'Shea. So I'll hand over to Steve for a moment.
I'm Steve.
Hi, Steve.
Hello.
And you have to do the next hand off there, Steve. So you've got to go down the list.
We're going to introduce Jerome here.
Yeah.
Okay, no, thank you.
I'm
Jeroen.
And you don't
pass it to
So Ben informed us that he would be in a lot of home front trouble if he attended tonight, and the reasoning that he supplied it added up, so we had to respect his wishes. Okay, so because we've got quite a bit to go through, or not we, Aresh has got quite a bit to go through as we go through. Just a couple of quick things before we do hand over to Aresh to effectively, go through, the main pieces of today's content. Is just a quick introduction. I'm sure that we've probably got a few new people in attendance today. So if you just sort of want to, drop a note into chat, or if you want to unmute to do an introduction, and then just a quick note on one particular upcoming event. So just if there is anyone new, if you just want to sort of unmute or drop a comment into chat, just quick introduction about yourself, just so we know who's attending, and it will also give Aresh a bit of an idea of how he might be able to target the message a little bit more for you as well.
Hello, everybody. Can you hear me?
We can. Yeah.
Oh, you can. No worries. Well, look, my name is Michael Kazantzis. I work for Security Operations Center at Zerilio. Essentially, I take care of people that they want to start maturing their organization. They say, hey, look, Soxeem, I'm keen. I am here just because, for me, majority of my job actually is probably research, figuring out what's new. How do I make the most out of the Microsoft licensing to map against, for example, the E8 as well as ISO. So that's a really big topic sort of in my cybersecurity world. So hopefully you guys can maybe talk a little bit of how to do that sort of thing, or yeah.
Okay, yeah. I think it's pretty much impossible these days to have a conversation without there being some security element on it. It's as opposed to it being that bolt-on conversation after the fact. I think these days if it's not part of that, the initial messaging, that message probably is not going to get very far at all.
Yeah. Oh, I totally agree. It's a hot topic and it's an important topic, and it's a shame that only now people start taking it seriously. That being said, Microsoft is obviously a very big player in the security game, even though they're not a security organization. They keep getting hacked, which is a little bit unfortunate. Yeah. But no, I mean, it's good to just understand that Microsoft is one of the big players, and you need to learn it, even though you need a degree to understand Microsoft licensing. So,
no, you just ask Mark; he'll tell you what needs to be licensed and how to get around it.
Just buy all the E5s and whatever add-ons are available, and then that way you're covered. That's licensing made simple. Yeah, and I've actually given that as an answer to people when they've said licensing is too complicated, and it's like, no, you make it complicated by not buying the top level of everything.
Yeah, you need Intune, you need patch management, you need what's the other ones? There's a few of them. How good is the app locker and application whitelisting with Microsoft? And the GPO policy is super fun.
Oh yeah. Okay, anyone else new or want to do an introduction? Okay, not seeing or hearing anyone. So So we've got our multi-purpose slide, the upcoming event/events, and only one, I guess, that I want to promote this time round. We've got the, whoops, did it stop? It stopped sharing for some reason.
It did.
Yeah, let me restart sharing.
Yeah.
That's better. So of course now Teams has moved windows around, so I need to reorganize everything. Okay, so probably the next big one that we've got coming up in Sydney is Workplace Ninja. So I think this is the second one in Sydney. And the big difference this time around is that it's a full day event instead of an afternoon only event. So once we sort of get in, unless Steve drops the link in, I'll drop the link into chat shortly. So if you are in Sydney or you're looking for an opportunity to come down to Sydney or up to Sydney for a Friday thing and then have a weekend in Sydney, this seems like a perfect activity for you. So
Could you give me an idea about the event and what would be included there? Is it just like a meetup and networking event, or what actually is it?
Okay, yes. So Workplace Ninja is like a series of global events where it's like mostly focused on. And Steve, you can sort of jump in because I don't think Jose's here with us today, but yeah, mostly focused on desktop and mobile management services.
Yeah,
or at least that's what the Australian flavour of it is.
Yeah,
I'm sure it. Yeah.
So what we're doing with the Sydney one is, I do have the agenda somewhere, but I've been caught up with other things and I can't remember off the top of my head. But we're going to be doing. There's at least Mac management, Intune Suite. I think there might be a security session in there, but it's user group format, free. Come along, we talk about it. Depending on how many people turn up, depends on how engaging it is. So the more people turning up, the more interesting it's going to be. But it's going to be an all-day event at the Microsoft campus, and we're just working out what that's going to look like. But then there's also going to be plenty of space to have conversations and talk and et cetera, et cetera. And there's just going to be a single track of 5 sessions. I think you're speaking there, aren't you, Aresh?
Yep, that's right. I'm speaking there as well. We're going to see Windows 365, not AVD out there particularly, just Windows 365 and demos and all of that.
But yeah, it's a fun day, and it's all just about talking tech.
Yeah, and and I guess with it, the sessions are, the scope of each session is generally quite narrow, so it's more of a deep dive on a particular thing rather than trying to, boil the ocean and sort of cover every single thing that's out there related to a technology. So it tends to be, pretty focused. And I think in the link, I think they've got the placeholders for the session times, but last time I checked, which was only a few hours ago, I don't think Jose had the sessions in there just yet.
No, we haven't. I'm just looking for the list. They're somewhere in my emails. But as you can see, I'm well organized with all of this.
Okay, well, with that out of the way, let's jump on in to, I guess, the handover piece. Well, I'll hand over to Aresh here. And I guess, Aresh, if you want to, I guess, because I know that you'll sort of be focused on the presenting side, and I guess either Steve or myself can probably just sort of give a bit of a nudge if we sort of see some things popping up in chat that need to be answered that you may have missed. We'll just sort of jump in and give a little bit of a nudge in those cases. But otherwise, Aresh, over to you. And we really do appreciate you delivering this for us. So it is very, very appreciated. So thank you for that.
As I said earlier, you guys definitely deserve this, and hopefully the session will be good. And thanks for fielding all the questions.
Yeah.
So let me know what you guys are seeing. Are you seeing the slide?
Slides, yep, all good.
Awesome. Perfect. Okay. So let's kick it off. today we're going to cover Windows 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop. My idea here is to bring in all the announcements that we had during MS Ignite in 2023, which was in November. So it's just right around the corner, and bring in all the updates which are till January into the equation. Please note, not everything that you're going to see in the slides have made it through the product yet. Hence, I'll do focus on things which I can show you and things that have yet not come in, and they would be coming in over the year, because remember, these are all announcements, so it will come slowly and gradually. And my name is Aresh Sarkari, and I'm a Senior Solutions Architect, probably the only one in the country with MVP and vExpert together. And I work for Dell Technologies and help customers in the ANZ region with everything related to end user computing. So that's about me. Let's take a look what the agenda is. So as I said, we'll focus on all the Microsoft Ignite releases and discussions around Windows 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop. And then we'll dive into the demos, and I'll try to showcase all the features that are readily available right now, and we can take a look at those. So what did get announced during the Ignite for Windows 365, and what was the biggest key takers? Of course, there's lots out here, but the few big ones which I really enjoyed was the GPU. And what do you mean by that, Aresh? GPU in public preview? So all the current SKUs that we had for business and enterprise, and when I'm talking about different SKUs and sub-SKUs, that is 4 GB compute to 8 GB to 32 GB cores, and all the different CPU t-shirt sizes and memory t-shirt sizes. We never had a SKU which had GPU. And now, knowing AI and AI workload and all the graphics intensive workloads, we needed a GPU, and that was a long going discussion internally to have GPU enabled desktops, because all the other competitors would have some shape or form of a GPU desktops in the making. So that's what the reason behind. I could already see that GPU desktops would be coming in. So they're not only NVIDIA based GPUs. The announcement was it's mainly going to be NVIDIA based GPUs. However, there is going to be an option for later on with AMD based GPU as well. But the bigger announcement or the bigger key takeaway was the NVIDIA based GPU, which is coming in. The other highlight or the amazing feature or a software which unites everything, Windows 365, DevBox, Azure Virtual Desktop, RDP, and so on and so forth, because each of these technologies had a client-side app of its own. What does that mean? Windows 365 has an app called as Windows 365, which you probably could go in the App Store and download. Azure Virtual Desktop also had an app called as Azure Virtual Desktop, Preview, which was another app to get the Azure Virtual Desktop resources of desktops and apps. Then we had the native remote desktop app in the store, which you could download for doing all RDP related work to your backend using that app. So imagine there was an app for each and every product. What they've done and what got announced is Windows app. It essentially unites Azure Virtual Desktop, Windows 365, DevBox, and Remote Desktop, all 4 products into one single app. So now you could just download one single app from the store called as Windows app, and we are going to take a look at the demo of that. And you could use the Windows app, which is a great welcome feature. And there was like people clapped when this was announced. We don't need claps out here, but definitely you could resonate the sentiment when people clap about some features, right? The other thing was single sign-on. So this is something which people who have worked on Windows 365 from the early days would know much better. Especially if you started something new right now, you would never come to know that this was a shortcoming ever. And what is the single sign-on? So earlier, what used to happen is when you used to launch the Windows 365 desktop, so there was an authentication first to get your tiles listed out. And then when you click on the desktop and the pop-up would come in for your desktop, you'll have to re-enter the credentials again. So essentially, it was a double hop back then. And a lot of people were asking to cut it down to one single sign-on. So that means you log in once, and then when you click on your tile for the desktop, it should take the authentication that you did earlier and pass it on to your Windows 365 desktop. And this essentially, what I'm mentioning right now, never existed in the older versions of Windows 365. So let's say if you had a provision policy which was previously created using 21H1 or even I think up till 22H1 or H2, something. So until that particular operating system, this feature never existed. So if you created a provisioning policy today with the 23H2 as the operating system and a tick in the box in the provisioning policy, so it's a two-way street, right? The OS needs to support it, as well as there's now a checkbox in the provisioning policy for single sign-on, which we'll take a look at, which was announced. There were quite a lot of announcements for Windows 365 Frontline, which is essentially nothing but a solution for call centers or use cases where people do not come or people are not tied to the desktop and work like 8 hours a day on that desktop. They come and go on the desktop. So let's say if they're working 4 hours in a day and they just need the desktop for 4 hours versus buying the whole license and occupying the whole seat for that user. Instead, you can have a 1:3 model where when you buy one license, it can provision 3 desktops, and you can buy the license based on concurrency. So this is not a new feature, but there are quite a lot of enhancements which are getting built on. The Intune suite support, which is essentially what it means is that although more the Intune suite, which earlier was a little questionable from the dollar value perspective, what's the value in for it, is now covered that it not only does privilege management for your fleet, physical fleet, it can also do it for your cloud fleet in Windows 365, and quite a lot of Intune suite features which were released. And now the bundle makes a lot of more sense from a reporting and all those perspectives. So definitely the extension is Windows 365 for that. And Copilot is supported in Windows 365, and there are quite a few announcements around Copilots and few AI features which have yet not touched, but I have some screenshots to show you in the later slides. Moving on the Azure Virtual Desktop, what was announced? For people, for context, Azure Virtual Desktop is a DaaS-based offering where the control plane is hosted by Azure, in Azure, and managed and maintained by Microsoft for you. And you are responsible for the data plane and all the other things like images and or other goodness like apps and everything that you bring in. Essentially, if I typically, the way I explain people around Windows 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop is that, let's say if you have an experienced IT team with experienced security, Azure desktop resources and networking, if you had all the 4 capabilities and on top of it, you needed a lot of customization, then go down the route of Azure Virtual Desktop. However, if you do not have any of these tick in the boxes in your project, don't go down the rabbit hole of Azure Virtual Desktop, because it is pretty intense and you will need a highly skilled people to manage, operate the environment. And Windows 365 on the other side is a click and go solution where within an hour's time, you could have the latest, greatest Windows 365 desktop running Microsoft 365 Office for you. And your desktop admin can manage and maintain the cloud PC in the same way which he manages the physical device fleet. So essentially, you cut down on your network resources, Azure skilling, and quite a lot of other skilling that you might need from a network security perspective or in Azure Virtual Desktop. So what are the highlights? Again, the Windows app, the winner, which is rather than using an Azure Virtual Desktop client, which was another app in the store, you don't need all those apps anymore. It's a unifying app called as Windows app. And I probably might show you a screenshot on how it'll look like with different resources in it. Another big item, which I feel it's pretty massive for Azure Virtual Desktop, especially for governments, especially for bigger, larger enterprises where they don't want to run compute in Azure. And if they wanted to run it on-premise, is the announcement of Azure Virtual Desktop able to create host pools in Azure Stack HCI. So to break this down a little more is, let's say if you were natively doing Azure Virtual Desktop in Azure, is I said the control plane as well as the workloads is running in Azure. Now let's have a scenario where you do not want your compute to be running in Azure, and instead you wanted your compute, that is the host pools, running on your premise within your data center. So essentially, there's something called as Azure Stack HCI. There are Dell supported nodes which one can buy. They're essentially Apex nodes which you can which either you can rack and stack in your data center, or you can get it hosted or co-located in a Dell data center, which is co-location with Apex nodes. And there's Hyper-V and all the other management stack which goes in. And there is this Azure Stack layer which does the whole integration into Azure. So you can literally put those nodes, physical nodes, in the Azure portal for you, and then you can have not only Azure Virtual Desktop, you can even have Azure Kubernetes services and so on and so forth running as compute on it. So what it gives you, you don't have to buy compute or you don't have to pay for compute in Azure. The compute is yours and you're hosting it within your own servers. So that was a very big announcement, and then I'll show you where that particular option comes in. Another big tick in the box was the personal desktop auto scaling. Before I go into the details, so there's personal and pool. The pool scaling or power scaling, and what is power scaling is that when you don't utilize resources, you want them to be shut in a cloud environment, because if they are not shut, you are paying for those resources. So to save money, you essentially deploy power plants in your environment on your host pools. So you start slowing them down after 5 p.m. office hours, and then you start ramping them up early morning 8 before 9 o'clock workload comes in. So that particular scaling always existed for pool, which is what the majority of the use case for Azure Virtual Desktop has always been. Personal desktop is nothing but a one-to-one mapping, because I would even argue if you're doing personal desktops in Azure, why not just give them a Windows 365 desktop, because Windows 365 desktop is a dedicated desktop for that user. So you can have better efficiencies of per user per month blanket charge in Windows 365. But nonetheless, in the personal desktop scale, you could do power plans for that as well. So essentially, if you had a user with a dedicated desktop, now you can set a policy that 6 o'clock, pause his VM so that there's no consumption of the CPU and you can save money, because remember, anything running in Azure is per usage per hour. So essentially, if it is left on in an ideal scenario where after 6 p.m., if the user was not doing anything, you still had to pay until the next morning he logged in. So now with this power policy, you can power off his machine. So those were the big announcements in the Azure Virtual Desktops. Now let's take a deep dive look into what are the features with screenshots. Now remember, as I mentioned earlier, not everything that you're seeing is generally available right now, and I will mention those bits when we get through. But Windows apps, definitely a big tick in the box. It's already live. You can go to the Microsoft Store, download the Windows app. Now, what essentially it look, and there's a dark mode for that. That's another winner. What you're seeing in front of you is nothing but a Windows app that I've logged in for with my Windows 365 desktop. It shows you in devices where you can pin your free, like your favorite devices. So why pin? So let's say if you were in Azure Virtual Desktop and you were presented with 300 applications from your catalog. You don't want to see 300 applications because you don't use 300 applications. It's just that your company has published you the catalog of 300, but at any given point in time, you don't want to see the 300 applications. So what you could do is you can pin what you use daily, and that's exactly what I've done is I've pinned in my home screen. So for pinning, you need to go into devices. So if you had more than one Windows 365 and Azure Virtual Desktop, all your devices would be listed there, and all the applications or published applications from Azure Virtual Desktop will be listed in apps. Now, you need to go into those two tabs, and which we'll see in the demo as well, and you can pin the applications appropriately. And with a single click and with SSO enable, you can log into your Windows 365 desktops from the app. And it also has all your settings around display, multi-display, which you can play around before in the settings over here, and gives you a unique experience to not only do Windows 365, but DevBox. That's another offering for developers, RDP, and all your apps in one single place. Let me pause here and see if there is any questions. If not, let's continue. The other big ticket item, GPU-based Windows 365 desktop. So remember, Windows 365 desktops are one-to-one mapping. That is one user, one desktop, and you pay only for that user per month as a blanket charge. Now, doesn't matter whether the user is using the desktop like 4 hours a day or maybe 90 hours a week into the whole month. It doesn't matter. It's a flat charge per user. And mind you, it's a very competitive charge per user per desktop. So essentially, there's new SKUs which are going to get introduced for your GPU base. Essentially, you'll have those particular GPU-based desktops. They come in these new sizes, flat out, starting with a big t-shirt size of 16V CPU and 64 GB RAM and 1 terabyte of storage. And essentially, you'll be able to buy these SKUs from the catalog. Right now, this is in preview, and essentially, I have no demos to show you because remember, this is a little expensive, so they've still not rolled it out to MVPs or anyone who's not willing to pay, if you understand that part. So, but if you had a use case, you could purchase it, and Microsoft can give you this particular SKU as per your requirements. But essentially, I don't have anything to showcase on the GPU one at this point in time. Continuing with the GPU, as I said, the current SKUs which are coming are with, you can see they're coming with 4 GB RAM for the GPUs with 12 and 16, so different SKUs. And what I really wanted to highlight over here is the frames. They did a awesome video that we all know about. The when anyone's showing you graphics performance, they do the swirly fish aquarium based graphics, right? And essentially what they did is they ran that same graphics on a typical Windows 365 SKU. And obviously once you start adding in more and more fishes in the aquarium, it starts crippling up and you can see it's going slow and all of that, right? But essentially this is a GPU based workload, and they were working on the NVIDIA one from memory. The fish aquarium could be loaded with hundreds, thousands of fishes, and still there was no lag in any frames per second. So what key takeaway, what is not the aquarium, but what I want you to take away from here is the NVIDIA as well as the AMD GPU SKUs are coming. And I'm willing to bet there's going to be bigger t-shirt sizes in terms of GPU size and everything coming in as well. So watch out. If you or your customers have a GPU use case, make sure you sign them up and get this particular going, because this is a very big tick in the box, which resolves the problem of graphic designers still wanting a dedicated workstation underneath their desk, where IP of such a workstation becomes challenging, while you can get all the benefits of a cloud and cloud security model and deliver them remotely, the GPU. Single sign-on. So essentially now it's fixed, and it's not only fixed for new SKUs. So what I meant by that is, remember what I said earlier, if someone was working on the Windows 365 last year and early last year, then there was no single sign-on available at that point in time. So what essentially has happened is, you can not only you can enable SSO now going on for any new SKUs going forward, but there's an option to retrofit the old SKU as well. So essentially you can come in and enable the Windows 365 single sign-on, which is the last small tiny tick in the box, and you can enable the single sign-on. So from 2 hops, it becomes a single hop. But remember, time and time again, you might be challenged for that second factor, but it's only 1 per day. After that, all subsequent logins of that entire day, you will not be challenged for your credentials. So we will take a look in the provisioning policy in the demos as well. Another important aspect is the encryption key. So essentially, all Windows 365 desktops are encrypted natively even today. And they are encrypted today using the Microsoft Managed Key. Going forward, you have a choice. If you don't want to use the Microsoft Managed Key to encrypt your Windows 365 desktop, which will show as encrypted, but today's encryption is based on the Microsoft Managed Key, you could bring in your own encryption key in the future and use that particular encryption key to do the desktops. That way, nobody can touch your encrypted desktops other, because you hold your key as well. Even right now with the Microsoft Managed Key, nobody can touch your desktops anyways, but there is an additional flexibility where in the government sector, there's always been a requirement. How about if I bring in my own private key, and you can now do it. So there is focus of that. So now you can bring in your own encryption key and encrypt the desktops. Then Lockbox. What is Lockbox? Lockbox is a feature which is used off and on when you are troubleshooting issues of Windows 365 with Microsoft support. Lockbox now brings to the table a feature where you can allow Microsoft support representative a very timely access to the desktops for troubleshooting purposes. So let's say if you just wanted that particular person to get 2-hour access, which was not possible today, it was really cumbersome. How do you give access to the Microsoft support for troubleshooting? Going forward, it's a time-bound activity. You can just give the Microsoft representative some access for 2 hours while he gets the logs, and after that, the access is gone, and no more the Microsoft representative would have access for troubleshooting purposes. So definitely for all those people who've done troubleshooting or had to do troubleshooting, this is like a big tick in the box where you have even more flexibility in terms of privilege access management, even for support now. Moving on, data loss. Another very cool integration, and I think this particular segment with Purview, for people, Purview is nothing but your security compliance and SaaS-based offering, which a lot of emphasis, I think, is going to come in the future. And it is already coming, and I can see it just getting amplified from here. And what I meant by that is, what I meant by that is, this is a screenshot. If you enable Purview or in Purview, so you need to go to purview.microsoft.com. And if you enable data loss prevention, this is an example that within a Windows 365 desktop, you've disabled printing. So essentially, this is a document which is open within Windows 365. And if you clicked on File and Print, it will get popped up saying your admin has disabled printing of such documents. So this was just one example. You can only imagine you could do this with a lot of other things into your desktop. And this was one of the big announcements, but I'm very positive there's more in the DLP segment, which is yet to come. But keep an eye on. And I'm waiting to try out this feature of DLP personally using Purview as well. Moving on to some security. And there's a keylogger detection using Microsoft Defender for Endpoint in Windows 365 and Azure Desktop. So now, not only it's further integrated, it can even detect keylogger within your Windows 365 desktops and Azure Virtual Desktops in using MDE, and you will be notified in the workflow that this is located or this is planted on your Windows 365 desktop, and it gives you a great, nice dashboard. So the reference here or the importance here is that you can now see things related to your Windows 365 desktop cloud PC integrated into Microsoft Defender, which has always been integrated, but this is like one step forward. Moving on, the power scaling, which is what I mentioned for Azure Virtual Desktop. This is GA. You can go, if you had a personal pool, you can select the actions. And the thing what I want you to focus on is the shutdown and hibernate option. So essentially, 6 p.m. Australia time, the user stops working. You don't want that particular personal desktop to continue running because it is consuming resources. It is a Azure cost which you are incurring if the desktop remains on. Now you have that option. Either you can shut it down and hibernate, and same, you can reverse it in the morning. That is, if you know the user comes online by 9, you can do a preemptively power on at 8:30 in the morning. So that way, when he comes, he can get the desktop powered on, or you can even do like on connect power on as well. The Azure Stack HCI announcement for AVD, which is, I am very, very optimistic and I'm very interested in this. Unfortunately, to do this in a lab format is really hard because essentially you need to mimic physical servers. So I've seen people doing these labs on NUCs, Intel NUCs. You buy 3 of the NUCs, put Azure Stack HCI nodes on them, which is essentially nothing but Hyper-V, and then creating the cluster from those nodes and running compute onto this. So essentially now within the creation of the host pool in Azure Virtual Desktop, you would have an option for the VM location. So instead of using Azure region for compute, you are pointing it to Azure Stack HCI, and then you need to select your Azure Stack HCI cluster, which is nothing but your physical nodes running Hyper-V, and the host pools would be run over there. So you will not incur any compute cost, which is a big cost for running running Azure Virtual Desktop. Some smart people have identified a way where the control plane, which I said in Azure Virtual Desktop, is offered and managed and maintained by Azure, and there is no cost associated to have that particular Azure Virtual Desktop in Azure. So Microsoft is giving to you as part of Azure, and compute, you can offload it in your own physical nodes. So essentially, you're not paying anything for consuming Azure at the front end. Of course, you've got Azure Stack HCI, you're paying for the physical node. But what I'm trying to say is that there's no cost associated when you break it up, and then it even becomes more palatable in terms of revenue because you're saving a lot. Because if you went down the industry path, you probably have to buy Citrix or VMware or some other third-party solution first, which incurs a licensing cost and then the compute cost. So essentially, you can do a lot of savings up there with the Azure Stack HCI introduction in AVD. Moving on, this is some features which are alerting using AI-based recommendation. Now, the term AI-based recommendation was used a little gently. And what I meant by that is that nobody knows what that AI is essentially. Like typically in a Copilot setup, we know, yeah, that it is using artificial intelligence. But in this, what they were trying to say is that it's making AI-based recommendations to your environment. And what I want you to focus on is the fourth screenshot. And unfortunately, this has not everything has gone GA yet. So I can't show you each and every demo of each and every aspect here. But you get the point that it makes the recommendation for underutilized license. What is this underutilized license? So remember the Windows Frontline discussion that I did. A frontline desktop is a desktop where you know for a fact you're buying licensing based on concurrency and not buying a dedicated one-to-one license where even after buying, you don't know whether the user is using it for the entire day or just 1 hour a day or 2 hours a day. So essentially, it gives you a chart that if there is underutilized license, it will now start showing you in a report that you have underutilized license, and it will make recommendation that why don't you go down the path of frontline worker license. And similarly, it does resize, undersize recommendation, which is nothing but, let's say if you have a cloud PC with 2 CPUs, 8 gigs of RAM, and let's say it is undersized because every single time you are touching high CPU because of your use case workload, now it will make recommendations that you should upsize or downsize, and you do the reverse if you had a 4 CPU, 16 gigs RAM, and you were hardly using that many cores and CPUs, it will make recommendations to even downsize. So oversize and undersize is taken care of. And there's some new alerts, which we are also going to take that the cloud PCs aren't available, which we'll take a look in the live demo itself. Moving on, the partner integration scene, where the announcement for partners around Citrix as well as VMware. So both the providers or both the competitors have their own version of providing a Windows 365 desktop. And why would you do that? So the argument always has been around protocols. So essentially, every vendor is trying to compete, saying my protocol is the best. And what are those protocols? So for Citrix, it's the HDX, prior known as ICA. For VMware, it was prior PC or IP, now Blast. And for Windows, it's always been RDP now, or the RDP on steroids protocol, which essentially was a unique selling point. So what these vendors are trying to do is saying your compute remains in Azure with Microsoft. However, we will deliver you that particular Windows 365 desktop using our proprietary protocol, which in this case is the Blast protocol. So essentially, you can't just use the protocol. Unfortunately, there would be certain prerequisites around deploying UAGs or unified access gateways to do the double hopping and the tunneling, and essentially also opening up integration into partner streams. Like if you wanted to do app delivery, not using Intune, but something else, the partner ecosystem would allow you to do, because both Citrix and VMware have their proprietary solutions to do one over the other. So essentially, there are certain options which opens up if you are looking at this partner integration. I personally haven't come across anyone who's demanded such a thing yet, and I really feel, why would someone go down this path? But then these integrations do exist, and they do get spoken about in the community as well as on our socials every now and then. Moving further, I've clubbed some miscellaneous updates before we jump into the demo. And these are all your latest releases that now, which is funny, right? If I do elaborate on this, some people might find it funny. The cloud PC, the Windows 365 desktop, never had a restart button. So essentially, you had to get a restart button using Intune configuration profiles. And that's exactly how I had done it, and always had the restart button from eternity when this restart never was there in your cloud PC. Now, on 31st Jan 2024, with Windows Cloud PC gives you the option to do restart from your cloud PC. Still not a very intuitive way of doing it. You still have to press Control or Delete rather than start and just having a restart button option there. It's still not that elegant, but as I said, that was never a problem from day one. That's like your day two setup while you've just got the Windows 365 desktops configured. This was like your day two task of getting the restart button on it. And essentially, there's now this new capability where even if you did Control or Delete inside your cloud PC, it allows you to do a restart from there. There's some new alerts, which we'll take a look at cloud PCs that aren't available in preview. So essentially, if there was any issues during provisioning or any cloud PCs that were not available for any sorts of reason, now you have a dashboard where you can literally see all the cloud PCs listed out there. I've never come across any in my small test tenant ever, any corner case where something was not provisioned. It's always worked for me, but then my scale versus someone having 5,000 desktops would be way different, right? So, but good part is now there is an alert which you can trigger, and we'll see that. Lots and lots of enhancements with Windows 365 boot, and essentially that's the last slide before I go into the demo. And what I want to do on this particular one of Windows 365 boot, I want you to take you through a blog post, because that has the best information. Let me know if you're able to see this blog post. Yes. No?
Yeah.
Awesome. Lovely. And I wanted to not quote things out of this blog post in my deck. I wanted to leave it legit, nice to read it. And there's quite a lot of new enhancements post Ignite, just recently announced on January 11th. And essentially they are all of them are for boot and switch. Before I go deep dive into boot and switch, let me give you what is boot and what is switch, because we're going to look at them in the demo as well. So essentially, boot is something like if you had an old device and you wanted to make use of that device, like a multi-user device or a device which was in the office, and you wanted shift workers to cycle through every day in 3 shifts on that device, you could very well use such kind of devices where people with one single experience at Control-Alt-Delete, we'll see all of this in the demo as well, from the Control-Alt-Delete screen, rather than logging into your local PC, from that screen itself, you get onto your Windows 365 desktop. So essentially, the shell gets modified of your Control-Alt-Delete, and rather than it showing you a local PC or a physical device interface to log in, you log in directly into Cloud PC. Now, this kind of a setup is very common for call centers and shift work where there's shift working, or any other place where there's shift working where people just come and go, like let's say Services New South Wales, where people are working in different shifts, but the device is the same. So you could literally have multiple users using this. And now there's one more enhancement, which I'll talk about in this blog post, which is just recently announced. So that's boot. Switch on the other side is, now if you have a good machine or a physical device that you use daily, and now you've been given a Windows 365 desktop, you could switch between your local PC and the cloud PC with an alt-tab kind of a scenario where your cloud PC just becomes like an extension to your physical PC, and the whole switch between your local and the cloud PC is seamless, to the degree that you could use shortcuts, you can use the task view, and we will take a look into the demo around how you can do the switch configuration and switch between your Windows 365 and the local PC and back and forth using shortcuts as well. So that's giving you a perspective of what is boot, what is switch. And these were the latest enhancements which were done for boot and switch. Both of these technologies have been under preview since last year, but more and more enhancements are getting added, and that's exactly what I want to share with you all. So essentially, you need to get the latest version on that particular physical endpoint. Let's say you have an old laptop, you need to enable the latest Windows 11 preview. Now, remember, this is still in preview, so that's the reason you have to do this step. Hopefully, in the future, let's say 23H2 will, at some point in time in this year, would have this feature built in, and you don't have to do this inside a preview step right now. Or you can, if you don't want to do it manually within and setting it up by going here in the Windows Insider program, you can even put the physical device into a dev ring or your Windows Insider ring and put the physical device there. I have done it this way. I've put that particular device in Intune in the Insider preview ring. So essentially, whenever there's updates, it will take care of the updating of the device from there. So both the options exist there's nothing new on this segment. This is prerequisite is what I would say. Dedicated mode. So essentially, there was only shared mode, which is here. I want to show you. We'll see in the console as well, but I like to show you first out here. There was shared PC mode. Shared PC is nothing but essentially one device where 3 shift workers are going to come and log in every single time. So it's not a dedicated device, but essentially, what if you wanted to have a dedicated mode? Let's say you still just had one person logging in every day, but still wanted to lock down that local PC so that nobody's fiddling around with settings and configuration on the local PC. You can have a dedicated user mode as well, that particular specific user using Windows Hello. So what's the differentiator on this one is that in dedicated mode, the authentication mechanisms can change very quickly. Now you can use Windows Hello to log into your cloud PC instead of entering the username and password. So that's one of the key enhancements with dedicated user mode, which you can bring if you have the use case around that. Else, shared PC, you can have different shift workers. That was the core use case around this. And now few more features are getting built on, which is dedicated, is brand new. Moving on, the new Microsoft Intune integration. So essentially now what you could do is that you can customize the login screen through Intune, which is pretty cool. Earlier, or I've not done it, so I'll show you how the default screen looks like, and that's what you're going to see. But now what this screenshot is trying to say is that you can customize the logo, you can write the name of the company through Intune, which is pretty cool to customize the login experience for the user from the Windows 365 boot device. Moving on, a fail fast mechanism essentially is just trying to enhance the login experience. Connection fail. If there was a connection failure, it will try to showcase that it used to give a weird error. Now it's a little glorified and it will give you the error in the shell in a nice way. Then this is pretty cool. This is net new. Unfortunately, my device is not updated yet, as in the physical device is what I'm referring. But the key takeaway out here is that if you come into your cloud PC, you can manage certain settings of the physical device from here. And this is net new, like totally new. I don't even have this option to showcase you, but this is a key takeaway around, like, you could have your local PC settings change, which you can't do it right now. And when I'll show you in my demo, I can't do anything with respect to the physical endpoint device at this point in time. And improve disconnection experience. This is for switch. Earlier, it used to be abrupt. Now, if there is a disconnection, it gives you a pleasant experience. And we'll see the switch part in the demo. But this was, in a nutshell, the net new releases for switch and boot. And now we should be able to jump into the demos. Let me know if you're able to see my workstation. Yes, thumbs up. Yes, no, maybe.
Yeah.
Awesome. Okay, thank you. So what we are seeing is I have the resources, but we'll have to break down the demo. So I have one VM, which is old, one of the old VMs. That's where the console is at this point in time. Don't get confused. The boot demo, which we are going to see, is this Windows 11 22 H2 VM, which I'm showcasing. And then the switch demo you are going to see is this Windows 11 x64 VM, which is different, which is a Windows 11 23 H2 latest device for switch. Hey, Aresh, why did you have so many VMs? Because remember, boot locks your physical device. You can't go, once you enable through the Windows 365 experience, the boot, you can't go into the local device after. That's the whole beauty about boot, that it locks the device from a security perspective. So how does let's look at the end user, and then we'll look at the console on how to configure Windows 365 boot. So essentially, this VM, using the workflow, which we are going to look at in Intune, was configured for boot. So you have configured this for boot at this point in time. And when a user logs in, sincere apologies that the scaling is 4K, hence it is little small, but sincere apologies, let me know if you can't see or anything. So essentially, if you reboot, which I will right now, let's say the moment you boot up a PC, the first screen that you see at hand is the shell screen. You click on it, it gives you the Windows 365 screen, which allows you to log in directly into your cloud PC. And we'll see the experience of logging directly into the cloud PC from there. But I just wanted to give you that, let's say this was not a VM, this was a physical device, and you get onto this screen. The moment you click on it, the shell that comes in is going to make you log into Windows 365 Cloud PC. And if you were paying attention to that particular deck, which I said the default is this Windows 365 logo, now you do that in Intune. So let's log into our Windows 365 desktop. So this is your experience. I've entered my credentials for my Windows 365 PC, and it's going to straight away log me in to the Windows 365 PC. This is, I have deliberately kept this for this demo to showcase if your base physical PC is lagging behind updates, you will get this. So essentially, the base physical PC is not caught up to the updates. That's why you see this. I'm just going to hit close, and it will move on to logging on to the Windows 365 Cloud PC. It's giving you a nice single experience of logging into your cloud PC. And now what you're seeing in front of you is nothing but my cloud PC, 2 CPU, 8 gigs memory. And this is from Microsoft within some secret instance within Azure. But that's how you get a seamless experience from logging in from a physical device directly into the cloud PC. So this was the demonstration for boot. I'll pause here to see if you have any questions. Okay.
Not really. But you are doing this on VMware. It's also possible with Hyper-V.
And that's coming shortly. I have a server sitting down, and I'm just going to build that server slowly for Hyper-V as well. But I have this. This is the legit software that I can put on my corporate device, by the way.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. So this is provided by corporate, so that's why.
Yeah, but for the Windows 365 boot, can can you use it on every version of Windows 11 or only for Enterprise or Pro or whatever?
And let me take you quickly back to the, I'm just going to paste this article, which is really good. And Elena has written it over here.
Mhm.
And essentially it tells you the technical prerequisites. It's a Windows 11 base endpoint, Pro and Enterprise.
Yeah.
However,
You have to be in a Windows Insider program. Yeah, okay.
right. And this is temporary according to me. I'm expecting this to go away the moment it comes out of preview. I'm betting it's probably coming in 23 H2 towards the end. That's it.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Cool.
Okay. Back to the demo. So we saw the end user's perspective of how boot would look like. This is really cool. No other vendor has anything close to this kind of an experience. Like even if you had a thin client, let's say you had a Dell Weiss client, that's just a very dumbed down device. And you probably can just log into your desktop from their client, and the interface at first hand would be the Dell interface of the Weiss client, and from there you enter in the username and password and log in from there. But this is like a totally shell-based integrated where it gives you the feeling of the shell from Windows perspective directly going into Windows 365 Cloud PC. And Mark definitely will have the the VMware versus the workstation conversation.
Well,
I'll be excited to hear comments on
Yeah,
that.
because it's not even really, and I put that in there not really as a smart ass comment, but just because of some of the changes now that Broadcom are implementing. It seems like a lot of the VMware community are not very happy at all with some of the changes there.
Totally with you on that. In fact, my vExpert program got disjointed from the main vExpert program because supposedly they want to sell off the EUC business. So right now my EUC vExpert got renewed, but it's a disjointed program at this point in time from the main vExpert program, like MVP for us. So imagine if I was the MVP for just MVP being the general and the subcategory being something else. That subcategory got disjointed from the original. So absolutely valid point, Mark. Quite a lot of disruptions going on out there, which is good. Someone would be winning. So back into Intune. If you get into Intune, Windows 365, come onto the Windows 365 blade. And if you were to configure boot for the first time, which I'm not doing it at this point in time because I already have boot and I showcase the demo. But let's say if you were setting up boot first time for your environment, this is where you're going to come, click on Windows 365 boot, and you will be prompted with this particular wizard. The good part about this wizard is what it's essentially doing is that if you had those physical devices, let's say in your corporate setup, you could assign the VPN profile, you can assign the Wi-Fi profile, you can do the language preferences, all of those management from here, and the whole fleet, those old physical devices would be managed through Intune for boot. And this wizard essentially, instead of creating individual policies or anything, this wizard makes it automated that whatever you enter out here, towards the end, it just goes and creates the configuration profiles, it creates the rings, it creates all of the things required to set up Windows 365 boot for you. So this is your basic wizard. You come in, give it a prefix, whatever prefix you give, everything in your environment and include your configuration profiles and everything would start with that prefix. So if I said W365 boot, B for boot, let's say. So everything would have this prefix in the beginning because it's automatically creating the resources for you. Like you can see, it does the autopilot profile, device configuration profiles, enrollment status page for boot. It's created specifically with this appending and the starting. So essentially at the end of the wizard, you're not only going to have an enrollment status page profile created, but a configuration policies and autopilot profile created for those particular devices. So we probably hit next. You can set up how those devices are going to get updated. Quick note, remember the current prerequisite is inside us. So it's not your general updates you'll not be able to use the device. So keep a watch on that thought in your configuration at this point in time. But you put in all your deferral, your update settings out here, depending on what you select, your active hours of your users. So whether you don't want the updates to be happening between 8 and 7 p.m., fix your active hour window so updates don't come in that window. After you put in all those particular details, hit next. And in the settings, you can now associate those devices to a VPN and a Wi-Fi profile, if at all you had in the environment. Mine is virtual, so unfortunately it's not there. But so there's no profiles to associate. The network has internet, so it can talk back into Intune. You can set up the language preferences, any security baseline profile. So let's say if you wanted to associate the Windows 11 security baseline, you can even associate the security baseline policy so that way the device can be checked for compliance, security compliance against that. After you select those actions out here, hit next. Now, now all you need is a AAD group for devices where you want to put all those physical devices that you have in that AAD group. And essentially, I've done the same. So I have a group where I have this one solo VM, which is not called as Windows 11. The real name of the VM is something different. And essentially, you need to have a AAD group with all those devices in it. You assign the group here, click review and create. And as I said, it does all the heavy lifting for you to get the Windows 365 boot enabled for that particular PC on your behalf, rather than you going and creating an autopilot profile, you creating an enrollment status page, configuration profiles, the rings for doing the updates for the devices. All of it is taken care through the wizard. So this is a great place to come in and enable Windows 365 boot. That's enough with all the boot-based enhancements. Now, quickly wanted to showcase you the provisioning single sign-on enhancement, which has been around for some time now. It's not new. I wouldn't say it's new anymore. So if you went on to your provisioning policy, now you have this option. Use Entra single sign-on. So essentially, let's say if you had a old, and I know of few customers who essentially, this feature, as I said, didn't exist last year, early last year. So when it came, now you could enable this option for your existing provisioning policies as well. So you did not have to apply. There was a phase where it only got enabled for your new cloud PCs that were getting created. There was a phase. There was no way to apply this change onto your existing Windows 365 desktops. But we've overcome all of those challenges now. Not only the single sign-on using Entra ID can be enabled for your existing desktops. not only you, it can be done for your existing desktops as well. So this is the single sign-on enhancement. Moving on to the other enhancements, alerts. So we have this new alert called as cloud PCs that aren't available. So essentially, if there were cloud PCs in the category that were not available and were not able to access due to host health failures or connection failures or zone outages or any issues, you were not able to connect to the cloud PC, all you need to do is, this is in preview right now, and by default action is off. So you need to come in your tenant, have to enable it and apply. Once you enable and apply, you will be able to use this particular alert. Fortunately, I don't have any in this category yet, so it has never got triggered for me. I wanted to show you some new reports. And I have on my blog, askaresh.com, I have spoken about these individual reports in greater details. And I also showcase a method where you can fetch details of these reports through PowerShell. So not only you can do it through UI, I also showcase the graph method to fetch the details through PowerShell. And essentially, these are your reports where Frontline is one great report where if you wanted to see whether the Frontline licenses that you bought are doing right justice and how many are getting connected. Because remember, 1:3 ratio. For one Frontline license, you can provision 3 Windows 365 Cloud PC. However, concurrently, you can only use 1. So if you had shift workers, in a typical scenario, you had to buy 3 licenses. But you know for a fact, in the business hour, there's only 1 person using it. So Frontline gives you the licensing advantage where one single, you could just have that concurrent license active and not 3. And basically, the 3 licenses cover the 3 cloud pieces in the backend, but you're just paying for that 1 concurrent active license. So essentially, you can see the Frontline connections out here and how many are connected. And this is your indicator as well. So if you've not bought the appropriate amount of licenses, this is the right place to come and see whether you've bought the right licenses for your group or you need more licenses. So this is one place to come in and see. Now, Cloud PC utilization essentially tells you whether you have underutilized or overutilized desktops. This is my tenant. So personally, I just use this desktop, the maximum, because that's my 1-to-1 assigned desktop. I have a flavor of Frontline workers, which are provisioned, which can come and go. And so anytime I'm showcasing the demo, that's why you're seeing 2 desktops which are low and 4 which have no utilization, because only people who I showcase multiple Frontline workers, or if I share the credentials of showcasing them the Frontline or a dedicated desktop, I have these standard users which are pre-populated. So it gives you a nice snapshot of what is your utilization, what is your connection time. And this is very useful business insights that you can take back into your organization and demand whether you need more desktops, you need less desktops, you need cost-saving optimization. Because remember, all of this in a normal world is money associated, which would be project money if you were to do all of these things in an ongoing project. So this is the reports almost coming to an end. Switching gears quickly, I wanted to show you one last bit in Azure Virtual Desktop. if you were in the HCI part in the Azure Virtual Desktop, so if you came into your host pools, you create. If you created the host pool type, let's see, personal pool, whatever, assignment, automatic, desktop, validation environment. I am not getting the Azure Stack HCI option yet, but essentially where the location and the location is, you will get an option instead of using Azure Compute, you will get an option for Azure Stack HCI. So you will essentially be able to deploy the virtual machine.
Yeah. Azure Stack ACI.
There you go.
Oh.
Okay. It's in the VM part of the compute where instead of creating the virtual machine in Azure, I can now, if I had a Azure Stack HCI registered in Azure portal, so essentially there is some prerequisites that if you, let's say you had 3 nodes, physical nodes already established as compute, it will start showing up and you'll be able to pick up the cluster or which has your Azure compute and you'll be able to deploy your compute part out there in the Azure Stack HCI. So this is probably a big tick in the box where people wanted to do on-premise or within their data center itself. So that, in a nutshell, is all the demos and everything I had. I'll open it up for the audience if they wanted to see anything specific.
Probably not.
Going once, going twice, going, yes, I have seen this. So basically, they have done a fabulous job of wrapping all the PowerShell, which typically, I think I was the first probably to write all the blogs in PowerShell. And if you looked at all my blogs, they were literally like PowerShell. What they've essentially done is they've wrapped and created a module. So instead of writing so many lines of code, essentially now you just call the module and it does the beauty. Definitely, it's a great resource. And I thought it also underwent an update a couple of months back. So
yeah, a few weeks back, I think so.
Few weeks, yeah. So it's a great resource. If I think Jeroen has already put that link. Take back if you really wanted to do things with PowerShell. My blog has a lot of PowerShell, but remember you had to take the code and this will be that much of a header and a body which you'll have to customize. They've wrapped it around in the module to make it easy for you to consume it.
Yep. And they're still working on it in the background.
Yes.
If you have any suggestions or whatever or issues, then you can submit a GitHub bug or incident or whatever, or a future request, and they will proceed
Awesome.
to put it into the PowerShell module.
That's awesome. Guys, anyone wants to see anything in the console or anything else that I covered you to see? Of course, I can't show you that AI recommendations. The AI, I can't.
Now I have to go. My work day is starting at 9. So
Thanks, Jeroen, for your time, mate. Appreciate it.
Work's
Thank you.
overrated.
see you next time.
See you, buddy.
Bye bye.
Anything If nothing, that means that means either I've put everyone to sleep, or everyone was already sleeping, or I've done a fabulous job, either of the three.
We'll go that it was a fabulous job there, Aresh. Covered everybody's question while you're actually presenting.
Thank you very, very much, as always.
Not a problem at all. Thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much, everyone, for your time. Appreciate it. And hit me up on any socials if you have any questions regarding Windows 365, AVD, Intune integration, single sign-on, Entra ID, or anything on those lines with this whole suite. Feel free to hit me up.
Okay, so I'll just stop the recording now in case anyone's got any questions that they want to ask but don't want them being recorded. And for anyone who hasn't attended previously, this is also where we just have a bit of a, like if there's like a bit more of a conversation you want in general about things, but again, you don't want there being a permanent record. Yeah, I'll just stop the recording now. So I'd leave that bit in so the people who watch the recording are always curious about what they missed out on.
Good old FOMO.